All right, I got 6:30. We'll call the regular meeting of the Common Council to order. We'll start with roll call, please.
Seth,
Here.
Andrew,
Here.
Todd Kirking,
Here.
Emma,
Here.
Todd Spade,
Here.
Cindy,
Here.
John will not be here tonight, Steve,
Here.
and Justin.
Here. Pledge of Allegiance. All right, item number 2, approval of the September 30th, 2024 regular council minutes.
This is Todd. I'll approve the minutes of last meeting.
I will second that motion.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any additions or corrections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Item number 3, council announcements. Any member of the council have anything that they would like to announce? Todd's mic stuck. Yeah. All right, hearing none, we will move on to item number 4, which is the first period for public comment. If you're a member of the public and you'd like to make a comment, now's the time. Please come up to the microphone, state your name, address, and try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes. There you go.
Hello, Tyler Martino, 373 West South Street. I just wanted to comment on the Vernon Reporter's article that came out about the reallocation of funding for the police today. So losing the second shift administrative dispatch position potentially. We were a family here in Viroqua. My husband and I, we are owners of several properties right here in town, and we pay substantial property taxes. We'd like to implore you to do everything that you can to keep our police department as well funded as possible. I know that you do, but the police chief has already said that pulling that position will take officers off patrol and put them more into their office to take care of administrative tasks. So we would like the officers on patrol as much as possible. You know, further with anyone with kind of half of a thumb on the pulse on this issue over the last decade or so has probably observed that when you decrease funding of your police, crime does increase, response times increase. And at this point, we're unwilling to accept like a lessened quality of life in the town due to being unable to fund the police department as much as possible. So thank you so much. I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. Anybody else? Is there anybody online that would like to make a public comment?
I think you're good, Mayor.
All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 5, which is review and approval of extraterritorial certified survey map for Conrad and Peggy Anderson.
Okay, this map went to Plan Commission a couple weeks ago. It's an extraterritorial that's located in the town of Franklin. The property is being sold and they're parceling part of it out. So just looking for your approval. Plan Commission did forward it with their approval.
This is Todd. I move approval of the extraterritorial certified survey map for Conrad and Peggy Anderson.
I don't second it.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, item number 6, review and approval of certified survey map for Travis Gary.
Okay, this one also went to Plan Commission, and this is one similar to what they've done in the past in the Crossing Meadows subdivision. They would like to be able to sell these townhouses, so they do a 0 lot line in between the two of them. So that is what this survey map is doing. So their Plan Commission have forwarded it also with their approval, looking for your guys' approval.
It's Emma, and I make a motion to approve this, what's the survey?
Certified survey map.
Thank you.
This is Seth, I'd second.
We've got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, item number 7, discussion with possible action on ordinance project review process.
Okay. Stephanie is here, but I wanted to do a preemptive reason and why we're bringing this forward. As you know, our current ordinance listing that's on our website needs some substantial updating so that we can get ready to codify it sometime in the future. It's got several different fonts within it, spacing issues, outdated ordinances, and it's generally very difficult to update it as its entirety. And Stephanie would tell you that for definite. So we're in the interim, we are working on each title. If you see it on the website as it is today, there's sections in each title. And so what we want to do is make those titles more readable and in one font so that it's reviewed consistently. And until all the titles are reviewed, if you've looked at the website recently, we've actually put everything from 2024 on that has been an ordinance that's been reviewed and has been approved by you guys in its entirety on the website. So it's not being incorporated into the document as it is today because it is such a mess the way it is now. So what we're suggesting is that we want to review each section and any new ordinances are incorporated into the text at that time, and then they'll be removed from the website as we go forward. One of the things that we've suggested is possibly having a small work group from the council to work with our attorneys to get these updated to the full council with their suggested updates. And the reason that we thought that versus having just going to each of the separate committees for each of these ordinances is so that we have a consistent theme throughout to bring it to council. So we would probably want somebody from Public Works, somebody from Public Safety, because those are some of the main ones that are on there. And so we're just bringing this as a concept to you guys to see what your opinion on that is. Also, we wanted to try and get a fee section started that we are pulling from all of the ordinances so that every year you guys can look at the fee schedule and see if it makes sense from year to year versus having to go to each one of those individual ordinances to make those changes. And it's so hard to do right now when it's piecemeal like that. And I know Stephanie has started the review on the first title, which is general provisions. So in a very short time, we'd like to get started on this process so that we're not consistently every year wanting to get this going, and we want to get going on it now. So Stephanie, I don't know if that's a good lead in to what you're thinking.
It is, and maybe I can kind of clarify a little bit is one of the reasons that the ordinance is such a mess is it goes back to the paper code, right? So we don't have one working document where we can kind of pull in like a whole Word ordinance, right? Like if David Jenkins back in the day used to print out a couple pages and walk them from his office to here and throw them in the code book. And that's just kind of the whole system we've been working on. And so it's led to a lot of inconsistencies in the code. So we want to get kind of one nice working document that's going to be easier to update for everybody as opposed to having to kind of cobble things together because that's kind of been a problem and then piecing it into the code. So it kind of goes back to those days. I think one of the things that I'm noticing Lori we've already put a lot of work in. We've got a lot of the ordinances kind of put into Word, kind of same font, kept the formatting the same, getting it ready to kind of bring to these, however we decide to do this, right? But I'm also finding just a lot of ordinances that are no longer, we've got committees or commissions that are no longer in existence that we could take out of the code. We could really clean it up. I'm finding some inconsistencies just in things that it's in one part of the code in one way and in one part in a different way. So, just kind of cleaning up those consistencies, making it more user-friendly, I think is really important. I think one thing Nate and I talked about is we want to make sure also, though, that we're not making this project bigger than it already is by taking policy stuff and trying to incorporate that, but it will make, I think, people more familiar with the code so that you could kind of make that mental note about things you might want to change policy wise in the future. But I think it's just getting it cleaned up, making things consistent, making it more user friendly.
So we're just kind of trying to get your guys' feedback on whether this is the procedure that you think that we should follow. Start working on it, start thinking about if any of you guys are interested in being on one of these work groups. Just so that we have the same people working on it so that it makes it consistent to bring it to council. Council will be making the final decisions on any updates or changes, but to get it in a format that you guys would have the ability to do that going forward.
And I will just kind of add in there that if we were to do this through like Muni Code, like to do this process, I think it's beyond our budget, right? So I think it would probably be close to $20,000 to kind of do this process through Muni Code. So what our hope is to do this process in-house with the staff that we have and the people that we have to get it in a shape to go to Muni Code eventually without that big initial expense. So
I'm just curious, and I'm sure this has definitely been looked at, but as far as getting everything to the same font, same spacing, all that stuff, has there been a route that could be done with like an AI version where it's scanned in and then just gets converted? Has that been?
Well, we're using the, basically converting it into a Word document and then it's being done that way or whatever. It's not necessarily we're not retyping it or anything like
Okay.
that. It's just structuring it so that it's actually all in the same, because it's all over the board and some things are capitalized, shouldn't be capitalized. So there's things that AI could help with, but we're afraid that if we do that, it may change some things that we want to make sure it's consistently the same. We don't want to change wording on anything. It's just bringing it into the same.
Sure.
And then this group would be the ones that would be like looking at it, reading it, saying, does this make sense anymore? That maybe we could update it at that point, but we got to start somewhere. So this is what our thought was to do that.
Thank you.
This is Cindy. It sounds like a plan and I'd be happy to be part of it.
I think it's a great way to go about it, and I'm grateful that Stephanie and everybody that's already agreed to be part of that is willing to. I know it's been a huge pain for both Stephanie and George as long as I've been here, and I know long before that, even having to deal with the ordinances the way they are. And as citizens, I do hear regular complaints about how difficult it is to find information regarding our ordinances. So I think this is very worthwhile, and I would love to have some folks be willing to, because it's not a small document.
It is not, but you'll learn a lot about the city.
my hope is it will become a smaller document
Yeah.
after we're
So
finished.
essentially tonight, we just really need to agree that this is the process, and then there's a few weeks-ish of work or a month or so between you guys before you need the group, or are you wanting to get, I
I
know
think-
Cindy, you're on the list and you've got a spot, so. uh,
I think Title I, like I've kind of worked through it. I sent it to Rick for review, just kind of on the general penalties, just to get his thoughts. I think that one, we could start whenever you guys are ready. This has been a project of mine for a long time and it will make my life easier once we get it done. So we can start whenever you're ready.
Did you say you wanted somebody from every committee to be in this group?
Well, I think Public Works and Public Safety are the heavy ones. And I know, well, Cindy's Public Works chair.
Mhm.
So if somebody that's on Public Safety is interested in joining the group, that would be great too.
I would do it. I know John's the chairman and he might be better suited just because of his history with the city and probably been involved in a lot of the ordinances in the past, I guess.
Would you like me to ask him, and if
I guess that would
if he
be-
won't, would you be
Yes,
willing to
yeah,
take the
that's where
spot?
that's where I'm
Perfect.
going. I just think he'd be pretty beneficial to the group
Sure.
if he's willing to do it. If not, I'll do it.
I will check with him and report back. So we don't necessarily need to take formal action on this, I assume, but I think we're good. So if there's nothing more on that, we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steph.
All right. Moving on to item number 8. Review and approval of pay request number 2 for the Center Avenue project.
All right. Probably need to do something here, don't I? Okay, so we had this at Public Works just before this meeting, actually. And this is the second pay request for the Center Avenue project. I do have some slight modifications here with regards to two of the pay items that were lump sum that typically haven't been in the past. And so both myself and the engineer and even the contractor, I think, just all missed it being a lump sum item. So maybe Nate can, there you go. So essentially what we have here, why do I have this volume thing in the way? Is that me? That is me somehow. Whatever. Okay. Well, moving on. So essentially we have just a little bit of the original removal work, installation of the water and the sewer on Center Avenue between Decker and Parkinson. There is an item, we're going to see a change order coming through on our next meeting because we ended up having more concrete underground than we had originally intended. And part of that is because we had done all the water and sewer design, and then we were holding off because we thought we were getting appropriations money. And then that fell through and we had to move very quickly to get this bid through so we could get DNR funding that was in hand. And as a result, there are some changes that we'll also see in the change order. So like, for example, all that work in front of Nelson's Agri Center, how those changes came through, we're going to account for those. And then some of the striping for the multi-use path, the coloring there. And when we decided that we were going to pave through with the multi-use path instead of putting concrete in driveway. So all those things, we're going to catch up with all of that stuff. So you'll see a change order next time. Right now, the only thing that's sort of like hanging in there is some of the concrete is in a concrete removal category that's not intended for the road. It was intended for the approaches, but it is the correct quantity. So we're going to pay for it in this one, and then we're going to go back to the change order and we're going to rectify all of those numbers so that it balances properly. However, like I had mentioned, there were 2 lump sum areas that people use like it was in each category, which is typically how we've done it. So there was a small change of $4,200 that is accounted for with the numbers that you have here. And so the bottom line is the current payment due would be $171,940. Happy to answer any questions.
Miss Cindy, I'll make a motion. We pay the pay request number 2 for the Center Avenue project in the amount of $171,900.40.
AJ, I'll second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Do a roll call, please.
Steve,
Aye.
Seth,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Todd Kirking,
Aye.
Emma,
Aye.
Todd Spade,
Aye.
and Cindy.
Aye.
All right, item number 9, review and approval of pay request number 3 for the Viroqua Welcome Center project.
Okay, a version of this was shared into your packet since that point. The only difference between what is on screen now is the fact that our third-party inspector, Levi Sisbach from Beerbecker, has reviewed this as well and approved it with his signature. As you can see here, the amount is for $110,291.46. Cindy, I didn't know if you wanted to give a brief update on what is going on with the project at this time. Otherwise, I can jump in.
I'll just briefly say they've started doing the roof, so at least it's not raining in there anymore. They've made some door openings. They completed removing part of the wall on the south side. Those are the big things, and finishing up the tuck pointing. And then they've got the trim color on the outside now is the antique white that it's going to be. I think those are the main things they've been doing.
Yeah, so Cindy, myself, as well as the architect Mark Zettler meet on site. I believe it's every other week for a construction meeting. Everything appears to be going really well. Knock on wood, it continues to stay that way. I know they had demoed up about half the floor, and we're looking forward to having the plumbers come in and the electricians to lay in-ground plumbing as well as a little bit of electrical conduit. But so far, whenever you open up the ground, you're always worried about what surprises you'll find. But so far, it's been so good, and I overall have no real concerns about the budget where we're at this point or paying this pay request. I feel like with all the eyes that have been on it and us being involved in there on a bi-weekly basis, the amount seems appropriate. So.
This is Seth. I make a motion that we pay the pay request number 3 for $110,291.46.
This is Steve. I'll second that.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? A roll call, please.
Seth,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Todd Kirking,
Aye.
Emma, Todd
Aye.
Spade,
Aye.
Cindy,
Aye.
and Steve.
Aye.
All right. Item number 10, review and approval of change order number 4 for the fire station project.
Unfortunately, we do not have change order number 4 for review for the council today, so I would request that we table that, please.
Done. Thank you. We'll move on then to item number 11, which is discussion with possible action on shared ride taxi 2026 exercise of options.
Okay, do you have the paperwork from the thing on there that if you want to pull that one up? In 2022, we did a request for proposals for the shared ride taxi service for the Viroqua and Westby shared ride. And our current provider is Passenger Transit here out of Viroqua. And when we signed that contract, it was for a 2-year contract, which was for 23 and 24. And then we'd have 3 option years after that. So if we wanted to continue with them, we would not have to go out and rebid. So this current year is our first option year. 2026 would be the second option year. And the way that this works is that we take our current rate, which is the $35.33, multiply it by the current rate of inflation, which was 2.9%, to come up with our new rate for the option year. And so in this case, it's going to be 36.35. They take it out like 4 decimal points. So that's why it's like a little bit of a rounding. So that is the rate that we would be paying for the driver hours per month by that new rate. And then when they invoice us, they reduce that expense by any fare revenue that's collected for our monthly invoice that we would pay the provider when you see those coming through on the monthly bills. One of the other things that they make me do is to compare this rate to make sure it's fair and reasonable with other municipalities and those fares. The state gives me a listing of what the fares are for all these other municipalities. Some of them that I compared them to last year when we did this was Richland Center, Prairie du Chien, and they were actually going out for bid last year. When those bids came in, they're actually higher than what our new option is for this year. So I consider that fair and reasonable because we're still under what other municipalities are using. So my recommendation would be that we would stay, we have not had any issues, that we would stay with the current contract to exercise the option at the new rate, which would be the 36.35 for this year. And that's my recommendation.
Thank you. Thoughts or questions?
This is Cindy. What did you say the current rate of inflation was?
2.9%.
So the 1.029 is something else?
2.9% multiplier.
Yeah, that's the multiplier. So if you did the 2.9%, that's actually adding in the 35. Yeah,
Thank you.
or it's a shortcut.
I'm not an accountant, you can tell.
So I would just need a motion in order to move that forward.
Was
I'll
this,
make-
I make a motion then to extend the shared ride taxi for 2026 with the option you just explained.
I'll second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Andrew,
Aye.
Todd Kirking,
Aye.
Emma,
Aye.
Todd Spath,
Aye.
Cindy,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
and Seth.
Aye.
All right, moving on to item number 12 is discussion with possible action regarding amendment to ag land lease with farmer on Railroad Avenue property.
At the last council meeting, we approved a development agreement with Chad Olson for 0.17 acres of property out on Railroad Avenue. This is essentially the follow-up to that in order to correct the lease and also establish what the payout will be for that farmer. So I think I'll start with this one, which is the amendment to the lease agreement. So essentially, it goes and talks about the lease that was signed back in 2023 with Mr. Joe Clark, and essentially removes 3.79 acres from the property permanently. This 3.79 acres consists of 1.7 acres that is actually the property that we've agreed to sell to Chad Olson. The other remaining acreage is the area of the stormwater retention basin, as well as a drainage ditch that runs north and south along the back end of the property into the stormwater basin. So those will be permanently removed from all that land, including the land Chad Olson owns, will be permanently removed from the lease agreement, and the amount will be reduced accordingly, right? So the gentleman pays per the lease agreement pays $226 per acre per year, and so we will reduce that amount off. In addition, there is a portion of land, and you can see it here, about 3/4 of an acre. And I can pull the map up if anybody really wants to see that. But there's about 3/4 of an acre that will be disturbed when our contractors go in to regrade the stormwater basement. So they'll basically borrow soil from one and put it in the other. And as a result, there will be compaction on that 0.71 acres. And typically, and this happened when we were talking about releasing out the land in the business park, is that a lot of the land that was heavily compacted wasn't seen as really suitable soil anymore for farmland. I did talk to Joe, and essentially the agreement that's on the table for you all to consider is that he would continue to farm that 0.71 acres. We just won't charge him for it. And that is a benefit to him because, yep, it's not as great a land. I don't want to pay $226 for stuff that's compacted. And for the city, we don't want to go in there and have to maintain it. So it's sort of, in my opinion, a win-win. And just the result of us having to do the grading work. So essentially, it's reducing 3.7 acres from the lease agreement of total land, but reducing the amount by that 3.79 plus that 0.71. Okay, and so this right here would be the new amount of land that we're charging on and the new amount. Is there any questions that if anybody would like to see the map again, I'm happy to pull up, but that would be the amendment to the lease agreement.
This is Seth, and I
Well,
make,
sorry.
sorry.
One more thing. And I'll just, if you really want to make a motion, I was just trying to pull up the map, but we'll use this instead. The second component of this is the actual compensation for doing this, right? So we submitted a land reduction, and per the lease agreement, we have to compensate for a portion of the land that he's unable to harvest. And so what this agreement, and again, these two documents go hand in hand, what this agreement does is this particular portion, again, is the 1.7 acres. Last council meeting, we agreed to an early occupancy agreement with Mr. Chad Olson for that, so that he could get on there and start grading immediately. In order to do that, we need to compensate the farmer accordingly. And so this agreement essentially states that this land here, we will compensate him for to the tune of $680, which will, for the most part, just come off the cost of land purchase from Chad, right? So we won't really feel it. The VDA will, but we won't feel that. And that amount was came to by our new finance chair, who basically went out there and took a look. Usually we go to the FSA office, but the FSA office is closed due to the shutdown. So Todd did us a solid, went out there and looked, and basically said you got about 20 bushels to an acre out there. It's 1.7 acres, and for that particular crop, you're going to get $20 a bushel. And so I pitched that out to Joe, and he said, "Yep, that seems fair. I'll accept that." And for him, it's a good deal because he doesn't actually have to harvest it to get paid for it, right? So it's a net for him. So he's agreed to this, as well as we were, because of the timing of actually approving the development agreement. I didn't serve him notice of land reduction until September 22nd, I should say, and he needs 30 days notice for land reduction. So this agreement also has Joe waiving his right to that 30 days. So it's all buttoned up, and if that works for you folks, then you can make a motion to essentially approve the full package of both the land reduction agreement as well as the amended lease.
Question I have
Yeah.
about it is if it's, and I've been by there, there's a lot of green yet in those beans. The beans aren't green, but there's some weeds and stuff. So I don't know when he's planning on harvesting it. But if he gets in there and starts harvesting prior to it being disturbed, is it already disturbed?
It will be disturbed tomorrow.
Okay, so it's going to get, my question was going to be if he happens to harvest it before it gets disturbed, then we wouldn't have to pay the loss of crops, but it's
Yeah,
not like we're going to
it's-
disturb it.
It's a great question. The agreement up here doesn't necessarily contemplate that scenario.
Right.
So I guess he
I like
could
to say that
do
because
that.
there's beans coming off, but it's wet today, so they're not combining tomorrow. And if they're going to move dirt tomorrow, it's
No.
point.
Essentially, I think Chad was going to move in there with a rototiller and just,
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's harvestable till after a few hard freezes, till them weeds die, because the combine's not gonna.
That's what I
It's
had
gonna blow all the
assumed.
beans out the back along
Yeah.
with the heavy
Yeah.
green weeds and stuff. So yeah, it's a ways away from.
I wasn't sure how soon
Yep.
Chad was coming in. If it was going to be 2-3 weeks, he might get in there. You just never know. So I just wanted to make sure we weren't having to pay for something and then end up not.
yeah, no, and I agree. I think, in speaking with Todd, Joe, the farmer, has always been very
Yeah.
collaborative with the city, always very easy to work with, and understands that this land is for development. So he never gets too
Mhm.
sideways about sunk costs or anything. Again, he just understands the agreement. It's like, okay, if you want in it before I have a chance to harvest it, just compensate me for what I need. And
Yep.
I think even per the lease agreement, even with notice, even if we gave him 45 days notice, if he wasn't in there able to get the crop off, we'd still have to compensate him for it.
I agree 100% with compensating. I just was as close as we are with
Sure.
harvesting happening. If it was,
Yeah.
I mean, a week either way right now could be the difference between him harvesting it or us paying for it. So I just wanted
Yeah.
to see how close we were to that. So I'm not opposed to paying for it. I think we should pay for it. I just hate bulldozing crops if we don't have to. So
Right.
if he was 2 days away from harvesting, maybe we could push Chad off a day, but I'm 100% on board with this. Agreement,
Just
so.
to that point, I have had conversations with Joel about the remainder of the crop. So this crop here, as well as this crop, you can't see it, but the drainage way extends down here. As well as this in the green area, which is that land that will be disturbed but not permanently removed.
Mhm.
I said, per his lease agreement, he has until October 31st to get the crop off the land at any given year, right? That's basically our window to take the land without having to pay the compensation for the crop, right? I told him that. I said, you got to get this off. We have crews ready to roll in around November 3rd. And he's basically stated that they're not going to be ready to come off until they're ready to come off. So
Mhm.
he's like, I understand what you're saying, and it's going to be what it's going to be. And for that reason, he like even giving him until another 2+ weeks, he's not sure he's going to be able to get them off. So,
And I've seen it. I can believe that it's the case. So, just wanted to throw that out there. So I'm good. Go ahead, Seth.
All right, this is Seth. I make a motion that we agree to the land lease amendment for the acreage reduction along with the early compensation.
Todd, I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? We'll do a roll call.
Pat Kirking,
Aye.
Emma,
Aye.
Pat Spade,
All right.
Cindy,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Steph,
Aye.
and Andrew.
Aye.
All right, item number 13, review, discussion, and possible action on the 2026 draft budget and authorized publication.
before we start, let's talk about process, about where we're at right now. Tonight, what we're going to do is go through this presentation, of which I sent a very simple spreadsheet to you folks before the weekend that kind of showed the variances from one year to another across all departments. After tonight, what we would be looking for is a authorization to send it to publish. We would then have a public hearing in the end of November,
The first one in November.
first one in November.
I
Thank
just
you.
have to publish it 15 days ahead.
15 days ahead of time, and Lori needs time to publish, right? So we'll have a public hearing at some point in November, and at that point, go ahead, Lori.
I believe it's November 11th.
I thought we had backed it up a little bit just because you needed more time to get it out to the papers.
Nope.
Okay. And at that point, we'll have a full public hearing. I'll have a little bit longer of a presentation, not too much longer. And then, the public can come in and speak on it, make topics on it. But really right now is a good time to say, like, if you have any issues with the way the budget is, it's like, it would be really helpful to know at this time. So we're getting to the point where the concrete is getting close to starting to set, and we're on a timeline where by the end of November, we have to have this fully approved into the county, right? So I'll walk through this. Stop me at any point if you'd like to have a conversation or discussion on a particular item. But I will try to.
That first page, should that say 2025? No, this is for 24. Okay.
Hurry up. The original one, I'm sorry, that's a whole year off. The Common Council is 2024. Sorry, I went back a year. As you can tell, I keep using the same templates. And maybe they don't always get fully updated. My apologies for being a little sloppy there. As you can tell, this one is extremely old. This explanation sheet here was from the 2019 going in the 2020 budget. Okay, so every year the budget team goals is we try to focus on these things. And again, within the state of Wisconsin, where we really have a lot of constraints when it comes to certain things, levy limit flexibilities being the key one. Every community in Wisconsin is dealing with levy limits right now and trying to stay under them. Expenditure restraint. We get a supplemental funding from the state as long as we don't increase our expenditures too much. So that's sort of the same as levy limits, but somewhat different. Cash balance, we talked about it that last year about how it's important that we maintain a certain cash balance to maintain our credit score. And then everything else after this is dealing with inflation. Inflation's been better this year, but over the course of the last 3 years, we've dealt with a incredibly large inflation year after year. And the one in black there is really the one that we came out of all the committee meetings when we were at the front end of the budget process. We talked about we really need to make some progress on the competitiveness of wages within the city. And particularly in this case, it would be the general fund, everything that's not the utilities, but the utilities are kind of following suit. So when we talk about levy limits, I just want to walk through this real quick because I think it's really important. Essentially, we are allowed each year to increase the tax levy by a couple factors. Usually it's what's called net new construction, which the concept there is as your community grows through new construction, you would have to spend more money. And the problem with that is that, especially recently, there's no inflationary consideration to it. So while our community in past years has grown on an average of 1.3% or 1.2%, inflation in 2022 was 8%, right? So that is sort of one of the really limiting factors of how the levy limit laws sort of constrain local communities from having local control over budgeting. The good news, at least for this year, is that TID 3 closed. And when a TID closes, you get to increase your levy a little bit more. Unfortunately, it's not as much as most people would hope. We closed TID 3, and that was about $18 million worth of tax base that closed. And you would figure by that $18 million now coming into the general fund instead of going into a TID, that would be a considerable amount of money. The same amount of money that was flowing into the TID for that $18 million should now come into the general fund, right? Unfortunately, no. The law says that when a TID closes, you get to have 1/2 of the percent that the equalized value total increases by that TID coming online. So if our total equalized value is hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, the total amount that is increased by that TID coming online is about 5 points, or a little under 5%. It's like 4.8%. And then you only get to take half of that and increase your levy more. So it's a way for the state to, again, not say like, you just can't keep taxing people that much. The TID is there for a specific reason. And once it closes, we're going to limit how much you can increase the levy further. So it's good news this year because we're able to have a little bit more control by having that 2.37%, but it's still not a huge influx that you would hope by conducting TID activities. Is there any questions on that? It's a little confusing. Okay. Oh, and the one last thing I'll say, and this is important as well, is debt service. I know sometimes the members of the community are confused as to how do capital projects impact our ability to pay for positions, or how does it help us, impact our ability to pay for supplies or parks programming or whatever it is. Essentially, when it comes to levy limits, they're separate. Okay. On every levy limit worksheet that you have to fill out at the end of a budget cycle, there's a line that says, what is your debt service amount? And whatever your debt service amount, the amount of money you have to pay down issues that you've taken out over the course of the past 10, 15, 20 years, you get to, that is not a consideration for levy limits. You essentially get to deduct that. Okay, so when people ask like, well, we're paying for the fire station, we're going to pay for this park, is that why we can't afford all that we would like to afford? And the answer is no, because the one doesn't impact the other the way we do it, right? Because we borrow for those projects, we're not paying for them out of the operational levy. Now, the only example for a capital project is something like a tractor, or a lawnmower, I should say a lawnmower. Lawnmower is not a big enough item to really borrow for. It doesn't last long enough in our care for us to borrow for it. So we do pay for that particular item out of the operational levy. But anything else that's bigger, lasts longer, it's not in conflict with some of the day-to-day operation items. Questions on that? Okay. Here's where levy limit sits right now as of the budget, and I'll start with this. So every year since 2020, we've had a gap between the amount of debt service exception we can take. Remember that line on the worksheet that says this is how much debt service. In 2020, we didn't claim the full amount. We had about, you see up there, 860,000 of debt service that we could have claimed, but we only claimed a little over 400,000. That's what we refer to as our levy limit flexibility. And each year since 2020, that gap has shrunk. And it's shrunk for a variety of reasons, inflation certainly being one of them, right? We do the same things, right? But they cost more, right? 8% inflation one year, 4% inflation the next year, 4% inflation another year. They all compound on top of each other. And again, our net new construction is only 1.3, 1.5% most years. It's not enough to keep up with that inflation. The other thing is we did add positions. In 2021, we added another full-time officer for the police department. In 22, 23, I believe, we added the administrative assistant position. Okay, so there was tangible increases that we did make to the budget and adding staff to sort of limit that, sort of put us up to this limit. And right now, we are right up against it. If you can do the math here, you can see that we are a little bit more than $2,700 away from our limit. So we're right up against it. And again, one of our considerations you saw at the beginning is that we wanted to achieve our budget goals while retaining as much levy limit flexibility as we could. And at that point, I would say that the budget team has not succeeded in maintaining any flexibility anymore under the levy limits. But we did so because we know there's a need among the departments for that additional cash to meet the service demands of the community. And so that's what you're going to see tonight is we did put that money into the departments the best way we knew how based on the budget asks. And I'll take a small part here is the expenditure restraint program. Not a lot to say here. The key is that every year they basically give us a percent that we have to keep under. They say you cannot increase your expenditures by more than 3.68%. And at this point in this budget, we've increased it 1.81%, which essentially means we are now eligible to get an expenditure restraint payment in 2027. So getting that payment is based on what you did the year before. So because in 2025, we stayed under that amount and we're eligible for it, in 2026, we get this amount, which is a big amount. $89,000 is a very large sum. So what we're doing here is making sure that we don't overexpend on expenditures so that we take ourselves out of eligibility in 2027 and then all of a sudden are missing this money or more. So again, this is just a key consideration. We have to make sure we hit this mark every year. Otherwise, we're missing out on some supplemental revenue that comes from the state that we just can't do without. Sure.
Yeah, sorry, you've got to use your mic.
As far as the allowable expenditure increase, does that ever get adjusted? Or is that been pretty straight?
Yeah, I mean, it adjusts every year based on the CPI for the last 12
Okay, gotcha.
months. So they actually do take CPI into account when creating that. Plus you get, again, another odd formula, 60% of new construction on top of that. So if your community is growing and inflation's been high, they understand that when it comes to trying to meet this. But we're at the point here where our ceiling is no longer meeting expenditure restraint. Our ceiling is just levy limits. So once you hit this mark, it's pretty easy to stay under this because you have to first stay under levy limits. So we're okay there, which is great. So we met that goal. Again, protect and improve cash balance. So a couple things that we started doing last year that we'll continue to do this year to protect our cash balance and make sure we have positive budget performance is having contingency funds available. One is for sick and vacation payouts. We'll refer to these as when people like leave the city or retirement, they'll walk away with being paid out for any vacation accruals they didn't use in the year, or 2/3 of their sick time payout that they've accrued over the course of their lifetime with the city. So we always make sure to keep a kitty there. And we did that last year because we knew somebody was retiring, and every year we can probably bank on somebody else is going to hang up the cape. So 22,000 there. And then number 3, the health insurance contingency. We don't know, we budget for certain expectations in terms of enrollment, what kind of plans people are taking, what the health insurance rates are. But of course, during the year, things can happen that people are allowed to change. Employees come in and out of the organization, and what the first person was taking maybe isn't what the new person in that role is taking. They may have a qualifying event that would allow them to move from a single to a family plan. And that impact has a real impact on the city financially. And so keeping that $17,000 around to help absorb some of those fluctuations that we just simply can't forecast helps us maintain a good performance at the end of the year. And we have been burned. I mean, we did take it on the chin, I think, in 2024 when a lot more people jumped on to health insurance that we just were not prepared for and ended up facing down a $60,000 budget shortfall because of it. Here's some of the department goals and priorities that I pulled out from some of our conversations. You'll note that a lot of them have to do with wage increases. The fire department in particular brought forward the idea of having a second fire position and really supporting the fire department in their growing caseloads and demand that the community has for them, both here in the city and the townships. And then the second half of them, sort of the same thing, wage increases, wage increases, wage increases, right? And that was not only among department heads, but that was among the committees that we talked to is again, really trying to increase the competitiveness of our wages with among our comparables. I'm going to pause there. Any questions?
Or I just didn't. Okay, I just didn't get a sense to see it. Thank you.
Okay. So here is general fund expense based on type of expenses. Again, the negative variances at the end here mean that we've increased those budget categories. So you can see when you're looking at 2025 to 2026, our total amount we've increased in expenditures is $107,000. And the majority of that is right here in wages. On the flip side, you'll see that there's giant drops in both benefits and capital projects. And as I talked about in finance, one of the things I like to do when we do this exercise is to remove capital projects as a consideration in these because it really has a tendency to skew the totals. So if we look at here, this still includes capital projects and you can see it per department. And then this one is probably the best table to look at. It's the increases in budget per department, excluding capital projects. Because if you look back here, when we exclude capital projects, which I believe this was like the other half of Sarah's dump truck chassis, it's $100,000 difference. So it makes it seem like we're really just absolutely slashing the public works budget. We're not. We're not considering taking the capital account in there. And again, we borrowed for that. So it really doesn't have the impact on operations. And so when we look at this, it's much more articulate of what is going on within each department. So you can see that there were no cuts to any department's budget in terms of the total amount that they're spending every year. Okay. And we'll kind of walk through each one of them line by line. Just for a reference, the other category, we sort of put some smaller programs that we do as a city in there because they don't fit well within any of the other departments. And those include what was once the entire municipal court, which was much larger. Now it's just the court prosecutor that we pay to prosecute, our ordinances over at the circuit court, airport, taxi cab, and the Board of Health. And the Board of Health is just a really small pay, and we do. That's probably around $800 a year total. So before we look at that, I want to just reiterate that it has been a really challenging budget year. I think most communities in Wisconsin are dealing with the same thing. The budget team, which consisted of myself, the mayor, who am I missing? Steve, I almost forgot. And then originally Crystal and now Todd for the last portion of, we met collectively about 15 hours after, sitting through those 6 hours of budget presentations to really take a look at it. When we first received all the department's original budget requests and put them all together, we were over levy limits by $165,000, right? And that makes sense. I mean, the departments come forward and they say, this is what we need. This is what we should have in order to do the work that we need to get done in the city. And it's the budget team's burden to then figure out how to go from being $165,000 over levy limits to getting under levy limits. And one of the sort of directives we gave to the department heads is like, if you're going to come forward with wage increases, big wage increases, we're going to challenge you to look at your budget and figure out where you can be more efficient with spending. How are you going to make this work? You can't just come to the city because levy limits. You can't just come to the budget team and say, I want $150,000 of additional expenses, because it's not going to work. Right. So you need to be willing to like really sharpen your pencils within your own budget and figure out how to make that work first. And then whatever gap you have, the city can come forward and try to come in over the top and add that. So we'll start with looking at the department budgets. Here's the administrative budget, which is essentially City Hall, as well as quite a few items that we cover citywide, things like the miscellaneous insurance, property liability, workers' comp. It's not just for covering City Hall. This is covering fire vehicles, public works vehicles, things like that. And so you can see here that the majority of increase you have is in wages. That includes a 5 to 9% increase for City Hall staff. Plus, and this is going to be consistent, the opt-out agreements, right? We've talked about this a little bit before. In the original budget, the opt-out agreement stipends was put under as a benefit, right? As a part of a health insurance expense, except it's no longer a health insurance expense, it's a wage expense. So basically, throughout this budget, you'll see benefits going down and wages going up considerably. Part of it is the percentage increases, but part of it is now the stipend has been put under the right category. Does that make sense for everyone? So part of this increase is this number plus this number. And then in addition, that contingency fund for retirement, sick, and vacation payout when somebody retires with a large amount of accruals. Last year, it was under the public works budget because that's who we knew was retiring, was somebody in public works. Going forward, the decision by the budget team was to move that over the administrative budget, keep it there year after year so that it doesn't sway budgets all over the place. Like, oh, why are you cutting this 22,000? It's in one spot, it's consistent, and it doesn't cause that sort of variance. But if anybody in the city retires, that's the pot of money that is essentially there to make up for it. Okay. The other thing here is we increased the health insurance contingency by $7,000. Again, that's for in-year changes to benefits, especially health insurance. It was $10,000 last year because so many people are taking advantage of the opt-out agreement. My concern is it more likely that more people jump on or that more people jump off the health insurance, right? And because we went from being an area where we had like 89% enrollment now to around 66% enrollment, I'm concerned that it's going to go up, right? And so that people are going to jump back on. I'm just essentially the idea of regression to the mean. Like we've had such good performance in that, I'm expecting it to sort of like people to say, maybe that worked out better, but I'm going to go back in next year. So I just want to be prepared for that. And so having a slightly higher health insurance contingency just helps us prepare for that. And then the big savings here is Lori's done a tremendous amount of work trying to shop around our property, liability, auto, and workers' comp by looking at another broker, similar to what she did with the health insurance. And at this point, we're expecting a significant decrease. We have to make that decision a little bit later on, so that will be brought forward to you, but I think we feel comfortable and that we have enough data in front of us that we can at least depend on that drop. After that, the only other changes were to, things like contract for services. We talked about Stephanie and Lori working on the ordinances. A large chunk of that is being prepared to purchase the subscription to MuniCode to get our ordinances online in the first year. The website is now hitting as well, so that absorbs a lot of that. I did move the CETA contract, that's the economic development contract. I moved that all the way over into the TIDS instead of having it touch the general fund, because most of the work that we do economic developmentally is TID related. So it's all eligible expense. And so let's just get that out of there and have the TIDS carry it. Any questions on that? Okay. Here's the fire department. You're looking at a total of almost a $34,000 increase there. The big news, as we've mentioned before, is we're converting the administrative assistant position into a full-time fire officer. And then there's a 7.5% increase for the fire chief. On the flip side of that, in order, again, to make the budget work, they're doing things like bringing fire inspection services back in-house. Those were contracted out for that $12,600. They're bringing that back in, assuming that the new fire officer will help make that happen. And then essentially in order to help afford that, they're also scaling back on a number of items that come with equipment and supplies and that repair and maintenance. The difference in benefits, and this is across the city, one is that we're looking at a 10.67% increase on health insurance across the city for the majority of plans. Okay. The downside of that, and these are worst case scenario numbers and is what we can go on. 10.67% for your standard HMO plan. The problem is we have a handful of employees who are on a point of service plan, and that one is going up 24%. Okay. Lori's still working with our folks from the insurance center on seeing if there's anything we can do about it. And there will be some decision-making points later on in the year about certain plans and dividends and things that we'll have to figure out. But this budget right now articulates what we know is like the bird in hand. This is the rates that we can count on. They're not going to get worse from here, but we do need to prepare for those. Lori, did you have anything? Okay. On top of it, the biggest reason that's going is that one, you have an employee that's making a higher rate of pay. Two is that individual that's making a higher rate of pay is also now on a different retirement percentage. So your regular retirement percentage for like Lori and I is around like 6.5%, 6.7%, something like that. For a protection rated employee, that's your sworn officers and your firefighters, they have a more advanced retirement schedule because they just don't last in their profession as long, right? Just kind of by design, wear and tear takes a toll, right? So that's like 14%. It's almost double. So that's part of the reason why is the retirement percentage is just that much higher. Any questions on fire? Debate otherwise? Okay, moving right along. Library. It's pretty blatant where the changes are. Wages, again, a little hard. I mean, within their department, there's not one set increase. Trina did a really good job of looking at everybody individually and assigning what increases she thought was appropriate. But on average for their full-time staff, it's about a 12.2% increase. Again, some of those are maybe 7, some of them are like 25. So it's hard to summarize this for you all, but that's about where the average lands. And then for your part-time staff, your part-time clerks, your part-time cleaning staff, some of them didn't get any increases. That was a decision that the library crew decided to make. Some of them are up to 3.35%. And I think the understanding there from them was that the clerks, part-time clerks, were generally in a good area when it came to their wages versus comparables. Okay, whereas the full-time staff, when compared to their contemporaries in other libraries, were well below average. Okay. And then everything else after that is flat funding. Again, benefits. The change there is even though there was a decrease in enrollment, it is going to back up a little bit due to those new folks coming onto retirement. One thing to note about the library is that while they submit this budget to us for transparency purposes, the library board does have the ability to sort of change what they're doing mid-year. They tend not to, just from like an accountability standpoint of making sure like, hey, we created a budget, let's stick to it. But they do have the ability, like we're not necessarily improving as a council how they're spending the amount of money we're giving them. We're just agreeing that, yes, we agree that you can spend $512,000 total, and whatever your other revenues don't cover, the city will use taxpayer money and other revenues to cover. Okay. The other category, again, airport, taxi, court prosecutor. Wages were pretty minimal. Really, the only wages you're going to see is the court prosecutor as well, and the 2 guys over at the airport. So pretty minimal, and basically they offset each other. Fuel and maintenance, as I sort of said before, the airport does have concerns about their utilities, so there was a little bit of a bump there. But the other thing that's going on there is that since I took over the budget, there was about $6,000 difference between what they spent for fuel. And when I say fuel, I mean airplane fuel. They have an airplane pump out there. They sell airplane fuel to people who fly into the airport. They buy loads of fuel, they sell it for a higher price, and they get net revenue. That net revenue is, no matter what it is supposed to go back into the airport's checking account. For whatever reason, long before I was here, the city's budget was created in such a way that it depended on $6,000 of that net fuel revenue to balance our budget. And I explained that to Mike, and Mike Skildum was just very confused. He's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And he's like, well, I'm just telling you what the budget I inherited from John Severson looked like. And essentially what would be required is you cut us a check to say, here's to help balance the budget, do that, or use it to pay for a budgeted item. Long story short, it just didn't match up with the reality of what was happening there, whereby any net proceeds from fuel sales go into a checking account for the airport that they then unilaterally decide what to spend it on. And it's usually to fix up the airport or to make some maintenance upgrades or to buy a new weather sock or whatever it may be. So this budget, in the most part, that $6,000 is just a correction of the budget to what reality is. And the budget team was okay with it. And as part of it, we said to them, they asked $5,000 for crack filling for their runway. And we said, how about we give you $2,500 for it and you use that airport fuel money to pay for the other half of it. And they were very agreeable to that. The taxi program, I'll spend a little bit of time on that. You'll see here that the increase is considerable, $36,155. But on the revenue side, the increase is $32,365. So the total net difference in the taxi cab program is under $4,000. Okay. And I do want to take a moment to spend time talking about the taxi cab fares. So as Lori explained in an earlier agenda item, the taxi cab finances are basically the contract that we agree to with the taxi cab provider, which is Passenger Transit, minus whatever fares they collect. Okay, so they charge us their rate, their hourly rate that we talked about, minus whatever fares they collect in a month, and then we get a monthly bill that says, here's your uncovered expenses after fares. After that, we get a considerable amount of grant funding from the state and feds. Okay, that helps cover that. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Once that's taken into consideration, we're left with what's called our local share, right? So I'll go through it one more time. Contracted taxi cab expenses minus passenger revenue equals the operating deficit. Then the operating deficit minus the federal and state grant funding equals our local share. And that's how it all flows. So the key for us is if we want to keep our local share low, which means that's the taxpayer subsidized portion of it, and we want to balance the budget, not go over levy limits, all that stuff, I don't see a way to do all that without increasing taxi cab fares. So what is in here is how the budget team proposes that we increase the taxi cab fares in order to make budget. And what I refer to it as it's the roundup. So instead of $3.75 for adult, round up to the nearest dollar, $4. Instead of $2.75 for student, $3. So on and so forth, until you get to some of the larger amounts. The agency fares, which is the highest frequency fare, instead of $8 go to 10. And when all is said and done, the total percentage increase that we get out of this is about 22% increase to our fares, which keeps our local share within a range that we feel comfortable. It's about $16,000 to $17,000. And that's historically where it's landed. I'm talking historically pre-COVID, because when COVID hit, we got a bunch of surplus money to help keep the taxi cab running. And now that COVID money has gone away, that supplemental funding. And so now a lot of communities are back with the reality of dealing with the local share. So if you do approve this budget, part of what you're approving is your willingness to increase fares. Okay. We are still in discussion with Westby on this. And we'll resume those conversations on Friday, but at the very least, they are agreeable to this amount. And we'll come back at a later time with what the actual fares are. But as long as we hit this at minimum, it meets budget. Questions? And Lori and I have talked about this. Did you have something?
And in process with this is being approved, it still has to go through a public hearing and all the other processes for the taxi cab program, just so you're aware of that as well.
Right. And I'm only bringing it up now because if you don't make that decision later, we're going to have to figure out how to deal with it because we will have a budget shortfall.
Do you mind just telling me a little bit more about the agency dispatch ones? What an example of that would be?
So typically, those are funded through DHS, which is the main agency that provides funds into things like individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities. And so what they'll do, if I'm understanding this correctly, is they'll purchase a packet of tickets and they pay the DHS rate for those, which is $10 per ride. And because it isn't directly on the residents or the person doing it, and it's on DHS, we feel comfortable charging more. If that's what your question is about, Emma.
Recipients of managed care fund dollars who have their services purchased through the managed care organization with the funds they get is where that fare comes from. So the residents themselves aren't paying that rate. If they want to use a cash fare, they pay wherever they fall in line on the scale. But if they're paying for trips that were purchased through their Medicaid managed care program, that's where the higher rate comes in.
And I don't want to get into the weeds, but I was just curious if there'd be caps on that, like if they're through
Other
agencies.
than if it gets high enough, there's other transportation options
Yeah,
that they could use, which would take ridership off of this program and put it on something else.
gotcha.
But that's far away from where that would happen.
So we tried to be very balanced in this. We met with Amanda from Passenger Transit and had a conversation like, where do we land with all the comparables? What are other communities doing? And we feel like we're very much in line with sort of like the average of where these fare rates are compared to other communities. So I don't think in any way that by going to this, that Riverwalk was price gouging or anything like that, or trying to make budget off the backs of these individuals. I think this is a fair rate for this service on the user. And again, I can't stress it enough, like across the budget, hard decisions are being made in order to make budget. And this is one of them is saying like, I know the folks who use this transportation, we had this conversation not too long ago about the fact that, you know, the folks who are using these, you know, these increases will impact them. And, you know, the response to that from the budget team is we're not sure what other options are even left. And we're trying to sort of leverage we're trying to leverage a bunch of small, tough decisions instead of a bunch of maybe one or two large, tough decisions, right? I guess is the way to say it. Spread out the pain equally is a phrase.
It's probably worth noting, I know we talked about this the last fare increase, but those fares at the increased rate are $1.75 per rate higher than they were in 1994. So to put that into perspective, with this increase, the fare will have risen $1.75 since 1994. So it's worth pointing that out to say it's not.
Right. Everything else has increased in price. This has actually stayed pretty stagnant. Okay. Parks and Rec. Similarly, focus on wages, 5 to 6.5% increase for the full-time staff. We did $1 increase for the seasonal staff. We're hoping to do a little bit more, but again, the budget just was not there. You'll see in there's that $9,000 to replace a lawnmower and buy a new trailer, again, because that's equipment and the lifespan on it isn't, well, particularly on the lawnmower isn't extremely long. That's why it's showing up in the operating budget. And then just some smaller increases in contract for services due to the cost of software. The police department budget, you'll see a total increase of almost 31, we'll call it $30,000+. We'll start with wages. We talked about this when you approved the union contract earlier in the year, that between sergeant and patrol, depending on where you fall in terms of your tenure and your experience, it's either somewhere between a 5.2% and a 12.87% increase that the eight, oh, let me take that back. Yeah, the 8 represented sworn officers received as part of that contract negotiation. The admin staff got between a 3 and a 5% increase. And the reason that that number isn't considerably higher is that, as you all know, that this budget does include the elimination of the second shift dispatch position as of mid-February next year. The equipment budget, you'll see there going up significantly as well. We talked about this at finance, that there's a number of items within the police department's budget that have been expenses for them for a number of years, but were not budgeted for. So things like their cell phones, their Microsoft licenses are now added in there. In addition to that, the police department is a very IT heavy department. They just went through a CJIS audit where they have to meet certain requirements per the DOJ, and our IT consultants have identified a number of items that have to be replaced in order to remain compliant with CJIS. So that will amount to about $13,000. A number of PCs, they have about 5 PCs that their officers use that have to be replaced. There's switches that send internet throughout the building that are borrowed from MCS networks, just like they were borrowed from them here. And they were fine doing it, but they're saying at some point you got to buy your own equipment. And so that's a big lift this year. In addition, a couple of other things like their fuel, it's particular for the squad cars, there was $3,000 added for fuel there. They are expected to be $3,000 over budget this year in fuel. So we're, again, trying to have positive budget performance. If we know there's a shortfall, we want to make sure these squads stay on the road and can patrol. Let's make sure they have the fuel budget to do so. And then the same thing with their maintenance budget, right? Let's make sure that the vehicles can get serviced and things like that. The only difference on there on fuel and utilities was some cuts made to the burn and comm service, like TVs and just some other things over there. Again, I know they say there's a reason they need to have them, and I don't doubt that, but again, we're some tough decisions getting made here. And then finally, in the other budget, some time ago in 2024, they were asked to make a cut in order to make the budget work then. And the cut was made, but it wasn't allocated anywhere. So it just sat as a cut to the other budget, but the other budget didn't drop any expenses. So we've just been over in that category for the last 2 years. And so again, it was just a structural budget deficit that we add more money into to cover. So I know there's been a lot of conversation about this particular piece, and I think now would be a good time to pause and say, you know, let's have a conversation on it. Otherwise, you can see what the rest of the budget looks like, and we can come back to it, however this group wants to play it.
Thoughts? You have some?
I hate to see anybody lose their job. It's, you know, once you lose it, you're not going to get it back.
It is one of the unfortunate parts about this budget. There's 2 departments that have lost full-time staff in this particular budget, and it's not easy, but I can't recall right offhand to leave that in there, what that does to that number, but I know it's puts it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's significant. I mean, you're talking, you know, the wages alone, you're talking 56,000, right? And so again, this budget in particular prioritizes, as you can tell, the officers' wages. When we went into budget negotiations, it was very clear that the officers, compared to the comparables that we agreed to, as a bargaining team, were well below average. And so in order to stop what some of the officers referred to as a revolving door of new officers coming in and out, we thought that was the place where we really needed to prioritize it. And that's the conversation we had at the beginning of the year, is like, we can't just expect more money, to fall. If we're really going to prioritize something, sometimes it means prioritizing it at the cost of something else. And throughout the budget, you'll see that. We can come back to this if you want, but seeing as there's no jump in conversation, maybe something will come to you and we can circle. Oh, I'm sorry, Todd.
Just, do we need to clarify, Todd, that nobody's losing their, I mean, they're not losing their job. She's retiring. They're just,
Right.
okay. Okay. I just didn't know for sure if you.
And that is a point. I know Nate mentioned that, this particular budget isn't terminating an
It's just not
employee.
replacing her when she
not
retires. Yeah.
filling a vacancy created by a
Is the sheriff's
retirement.
department okay to, take,
The sheriff spoke, he addressed the fact that it will be an increased workload on them, but they currently, and I'm glad you asked that because I think that's an important part to hit on here. Currently and historically, since the inception of 911, Vernon County Sheriff's Department has answered every 911 call that's came in from a city resident. The Viroqua Police Department dispatch is never, unless Rick could tell me I'm wrong, if they had an outage out at the sheriff's department, potentially maybe they did, but the city of Viroqua does not deal with 911 calls. Now they're taken out of the sheriff's department and transferred into the Viroqua dispatch for different types of things, and the dispatch does handle them at some point. But currently they're all originating out there. So there's not going to be, from that perspective, a higher call volume in terms of number of calls coming in there. Now, people may call there more in the off hours trying to get other things done, but I think that's going to be a learning curve for the residents to know that our dispatch is open between these hours, and the sheriff's department isn't responsible for dealing with non-emergency situations in the off hours. And that is a loss of service. And Corinna and Annette did a big presentation, and it was really well done. There are services that will be lost to the citizens. But as we continue to go through the budget, and as Nate pointed out, and I've seen it and we've all talked about it, the difference between where we're at from a budget to where we can be is within $2,000. And to keep this position, the only way to keep this position is for another position to go somewhere else. And it's not to say that position isn't valuable. It's undeniably have a value, but I don't see a way that it can carry on,
Fair enough.
unfortunately. But you're not wrong. I want to address that. I know there's a lot of people that have really strong opinions about that. Wasn't an easy discussion. And had there not been a retirement coming, I don't know. I can't speak where we would have ended, but that did make it easier to just not replace a retirement. But again, there are citizens will feel a difference because after a certain period of time in the day, it'll be closed. So, but the sheriff's department, from an emergency perspective, we won't lose any emergency capacity. I don't believe.
Thank you.
Nate, this the increased wage will make it more so that it's more equitable in terms of comparisons now.
Yeah, I mean, with the sworn officers, so basically your patrolmen, your canine officers, your investigator, sergeants. Yep, that is, the intention was to land at average among the 10 comparables we looked at.
Sorry, I'll talk more. But that is a point, and I think you'll see that that's, to Nate's point when we started this, that's the theme across all of here. Like, we've had, that's been a theme that I've heard as long as I've been mayor here, from all departments, right? From a city administrator all the way down through the organization, the library clerks, the part-time staff there, the park and rec staff, the high school kids. I mean, we're by far, in a lot of instances, far away from where we should be to attract and retain good quality employees across the city. And it's frustrating. And law enforcement specifically, the amount of training and time and effort invested into those individuals to get them trained up here and have them leave for $4 an hour is frustrating to the chief. It's frustrating to the leadership at the police department. It's frustrating to me. And I know to some of the other, council members and citizens. So, to Nate's point, we believe everybody here, we'd love to pay everybody more than average. But even with all the adjustments we made across the city, I don't think a single employee can say that they're paid above average from our comparable communities, but a lot of them can finally say they're paid average to our comparable communities.
That's kind of more my focus. I mean, it's obviously a huge loss of that position, but I think this budget is also really accomplishing some wage increases that we've known has needed to happen. And I think that is a success given the limitations. So it's like there's a huge loss, and also the bigger piece of making sure that people are being paid comparably to other communities is really important, because we want to retain, and like the longer we have people in our community that work for departments, it's a huge asset for us. So I don't want to lose that.
And the chief has, I mean, he's got all kinds of reasons why keeping them long term, and they're all so valuable, right? Specifically with law enforcement, like getting these people here and keeping them here is so valuable. And I think we can all understand why that is. So
I love calling the police when I do, and I know them by name. It's it's really good to know who you're talking to on the phone and you've met them. I think that's very special. So I think Rick has like mentored a lot of people here, and they're sticking around. And so that's good.
Yep.
Progress forward here. And again, if we want to go back to any of the departments, we can. Public Works here. You'll see again on wages, you'll see 5% increase for DPW and then 7.5% for all other staff. The reason that number is not larger is again because we moved that retirement payout contingency out of Public Works wages into the admin wages. So that number would be what, $36,000 increase for all of that had we not offset it by pulling that money out and putting it into a different department. Under contract for services, really the only reason that is up is because of the scheduled fee increase by GFL. So we went into a contract with them, a 3-year contract. This is the $1.25 increase or the 50-cent increase. I can't remember exactly what it is, from one year to the next that we agreed on in our negotiations and the RFP process that we undertook. And essentially this increase is offset equally by an increase of fees on the residents. So whatever that goes up, we just make sure the math always puts us at pretty much a zero net difference. Okay, so on the revenue side, you'll see this go up like $28,600. Okay, so that won't have an impact on levy limits to put out there. Fuel and utilities, again, we pointed this out in our financial review, is that I meant to say in-house, not below ground. I think that's what I was looking for. In-house fuel tank, so that the Public Works Department installed is really saving a lot of money in terms of diesel fuel. And so that's why that budget is decreasing by $15,000. And then all the other reductions you see under repair and maintenance, and there was another smaller one somewhere. There was one under the other budget, is in order to support the wage increases.
Where had they previously been fueling? That wasn't an on-site tank?
Was it Moglen? Or DeLap?
Okay.
I think it was DeLapse.
Todd thinks DeLap.
Yeah.
Todd,
DeLapse, yeah.
Now it's Moglen because he's the one.
Sure.
He's the one that's got the tank.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Rented
But it
from
was
him.
DeLap at the point.
Yeah. They had the, right. Yep.
Good change.
I see.
Forever it'll be.
So again, just in summary, like when we look at this budget year, a couple of the big changes we made to full-time positions, quite a few of the departments were either flat funded or decreased some of their equipment, supplies, and maintenance in order to sort of make it work. Obviously, it's not going to cover the whole thing of their wages, but they tried to get creative and get more efficient. The other thing we had to deal with is that we did see some of our intergovernmental funding sources get hit. So again, we talked about this intergovernmental revenue previously. We do expect it to rebound, but this is the tax equivalency amount that when we looked at finances through the first 2/3 of the year, we're at a deficit, and we can't go into next year assuming that it's going to meet budget projections again. So we did have to decrease the budget significantly on that in order to get to a point where it was realistic, right? And the other one is the highway transportation aid was a real hit, $38,000. Two different things. One is connecting highway was reduced by about $19,000 because of the twiddle. It was not made known to us and was quite the surprise when they said because you went from 4 lanes down to 3 lanes that your annual connecting highway aid would decrease by that much. And the person at the DOT was not the first time she's had to apologize for the lack of communication on this. And Sarah has already drafted a letter from her office and my office imploring Senator Paff to take that particular issue under his wing because it was a HISSUP project. It wasn't even our project technically. It was the DOT's project. And they went ahead and encouraged us to do it. We're happy with it. I think Chief Needfeld has noted what kind of safety improvements it's made in reducing rear end collisions. But it would have been nice if somebody would have told us that it would have been the cost of $19,000 per year. It should have been part of the consideration, but again, we're dealing with it now. And again, contact your legislature. The other half of it is something to do with how we're spending money in terms of road repair. And Sarah is also working on that with the auditors. We have a feeling we're optimistic at this point that after a conversation with the auditors and some corrections that aid may go back up, but it's too early to tell. And it's certainly too early to guarantee that other $18,000 will go up. All right. And when we just as we talk about wage increases, this is part of the reason why we really try to push it is that on the left, you'll see the annual inflation. And on the right is what the city has given out in these years as base COLA increases. So as you can tell, while we're giving out COLA increases of 2% and 3%, the inflation on cost of living is going up 4, 8, 4, and 3. And so last year, when we made the 2025 budget, we were hoping to give out a COLA increase of 3%, but by the end of the year, the CPI had climbed to 3.2. So even in that year, despite our best efforts, we weren't able to get people kept with inflation. And so I bring this up because it's important to note that we try to be comparable with other communities, but we also want to be comparable with how competitive our own rates were back in 2020 and 2021. And so again, this budget seeks in some ways to get us back there, but certainly it should be noted that it doesn't get us all the way back there for everybody. So again, I just wanted to do that overview of wages and really show to people like this is where the money is being spent this year in terms of the biggest increases, and a lot of that, and just to caveat that some of that is opt-out. Questions on that? Somebody want to buy time while I plug in my computer?
This is Cindy, I just want to thank the budget team and everyone involved for all their hard work and able to get to this point. I know it's been difficult and time consuming, but thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And it's worth pointing out too that every single department head in the city has been right there along with the budget team, pulling their hair out to try to make it through this. And at the start of the process, we had a department head meeting and it was conveyed what we were up against, and the department heads really dug in and really came with a good first. I know Nate said the first draft was high, but that was still a really good first attempt on their behalf. So I think the staff here at the city overall, I greatly appreciate the efforts they've all put in through this process too. It's been a rough one.
So I'll just breeze through a little bit the revenue on that side a bit. Here's what it looks like excluding the borrowing for capital projects. So we're talking about increasing again the budget by $212,000. And I can go back through the point of this particular presentation tonight was not to do a really deep dive. Usually I save that for the public hearing that's going to happen in November. But because we're sort of at the point where we have some, controversial decisions that we're making here, some tough conversations we're having, I thought it would be more important to dive in a little bit deeper at this point so that we can start the conversations if they need to start, and they can finish at the public hearing, whatever it may be. But you'll notice that there's a lot less detail on the revenue side than there on their expense side. And you can kind of just generally see here that, intergovernmental revenue, while we did see some jumps from shared revenue and some other sources, the hit that came from the transportation aid that we just talked about and the intergovernmental tax equivalency really didn't allow that to increase as much as we would have hoped. And then down here, a couple things to note is public charges for services. Again, most of that is going to be like your your taxi cab as well as your waste and recycling fees. And then interdepartmental revenue, again, with the fire department, you did note that their expenses were going up considerably, but their revenues are also going up considerably because we are requesting that the townships take on a larger share of that fire officer than what they were taking on with the administrative assistant. So we are trying to, again, limit the budget impact to us by asking the townships to jump in as well. And that's, they're in a tough situation as well, but I hopefully we've gotten to a point where it's palatable, and
we'll meet with them after. So the process with that is really sticky.
Yeah.
Historically, the city has worked all the way through their budget, essentially passed it, and then we present it to the townships. This year, and we started it last year, where the city kind of gets a start, and then we have a meeting with the townships, kind of bring them into, and you've seen Howard White was here one night during some of the budget discussions, and then Barrett, I think, has been to a couple different different meetings. So I think, as we get every milestone we hit as a city, then the chief will call the townships and say, okay, this is kind of where they're at. And to Nate's point, they're having the same kind of struggles we are because inflation is what it is, and all that is. But I think they've agreed. They've not been objecting to any of the things that have been proposed. It's just kind of waiting for the shoe to drop of like, okay, how much actual money are we talking about? So they've been very supportive of the position change and the big increases, and they understand the need for it. So I don't see any major hurdles as a result of that.
I included this graph here just as an illustration of the net difference for the different departments. And I think this tells an additional side of the story. And I'll pick on the library here. So the library, we looked at their budget and it was going up, I believe, like $19,000. But we also have to know is that they're getting an additional, I think, $7,000+ from a couple of their like cross county and county aid that they get specifically for their library. So their actual impact on the taxpayer levy is much lower than if you only look at expenses. So again, this kind of looks at the net of the department expenses and department revenues, and what is the impact right here? What is the use? How is the property tax and all other revenue, we'll call it generic revenue, things like shared revenue or video service provider fees, stuff that's not directed towards one department or another. How is that money spent, right? And you can see here that, every department did increase in their reliance on the tax and other revenue. Public Works about 20,000, the police about 43 or so, Parks and Rec 30, so on and so forth. The fire department, to that point I just made about the townships pitching in more, even though their budget expenses are going up, $39,000 or $33,000, I should say. The difference of what it's actually going up is less than 20 because of the townships putting in more revenue. So I think that's another key thing to look at because that's in some ways the decisions you guys get to make is how do you take that scarce taxpayer and other revenue dollars and allocate it among the different departments. The one caveat I'll make about that is that it's not a perfect science attributing certain revenues to departments, right? So someone could make the claim is like, well, shouldn't the revenue that comes in from alcohol license go to a certain department? Maybe, but that's not super clear to me. So I just consider alcohol license revenue all other revenue that you guys can spread out to any department that you wish, right? So just want you to know that because it's not an exact science about which revenues are attributed to what departments, but things like state highway aids and connecting highway aids is clearly meant to support the work of public works and taking care of streets. Here's where we're at when sort of the dust settled, the property tax levy, we are looking at a 4.7% increase from the previous year. The equalized value, including the TIDs within the city, is a 13.11% increase. Okay, that's including the TIDs. What that does for the mill rate is a 6.4%, or sorry, it puts our mill rate at 6.41. So you can see that the mill rate has really gone down. And the reason for that is because the equalized value has escalated at such a rapid rate year over year due to inflation. And what's interesting to note is that we looked at those CPI numbers at being like sometimes 4, sometimes 8%. That includes a lot of different goods and services, right? But the one that is really, really high within there is housing. Like the rate of inflation on housing costs has been the largest driver of that going up, to the point where a lot of people are talking about having it be its own inflationary number instead of being mingled in with the rest of goods and services that make up CPIU. And so just a couple other things. Here's just what we're doing in terms of additional debt service. So this year, even though we took on additional debt in 2025, it's being offset by the fact that some other issuances are going away. So the total increase in our debt service payment is $10,000. And so when you see the property tax going up by 132, you know that the total amount of new operating spending we're doing is 121,000. Or that money is being used to support operating expenses. Again, here's our levy limit flexibility that's left. And then here's the taxpayer impact, right? So what's interesting about this is because the TID is closing, it's actually putting more tax base into the general fund to sort of spread out the impact, okay? So because there's not as much being kept by the TIDs, the total taxpayer amount going should cause taxes to pretty much remain the same. Even though we're increasing the levy, the fact that the TID's online right now and that revenue that would have gone into the TID and been kept for TID projects is now can help share the load, so to speak, of our tax increase. Does that make sense? Okay. And that's so whereas at the front end of it, I was sort of negative about the fact that, man, when a TID closes, it sure would be good to leverage all the tax base towards having more money to play with. And instead of it going in TID, it just goes to help the general fund. That doesn't happen. But what it does do is it comes back into the general fund and helps shoulder the load of what our operating levy needs to be. I don't know if I did any better job of explaining that there, but if anybody's wondering how we can increase our tax levy, but the burden per household goes down, that's the reason why, is because there's more property value shouldering the load. Okay. And again, I have a caveat on there. This is not a guaranteed scenario for all property owners. So if you go to them and say, your property taxes should go down, it's all relative, right? It's like your individual property, especially as we're going into a reassessment here and everybody got their reassessment levels. The mill rate, as you saw, will drop, right? Because property values are going up and we're not sending the levy up by an equal amount. But it all depends on like how much your property is worth versus other people's property in the community, right? So it's somewhat situational. So don't make those guarantees to people because it may not happen exactly for them, especially if they made major improvements to their house or there's something about their home or their land that's in particularly valuable. Okay, with that, I'll stop talking. Are there any questions?
Got to be questions after that. Thank you. I think you did a to your point, I think rather than doing a quick overview, I think we got into it deep enough that I think probably helped. This particular budget has some concerns out in the public, and hopefully if people are watching this, or, I don't know if Tim's online or not, but hopefully that helps with some of his questions.
Thanks, Nate.
Sure.
Appreciate all that work of laying out what we've been up against with it.
Mhm.
It's glad to see our efforts towards those wage improvements. It's just what needs to be the first step.
I think for me, what really stands out with the budgeting, when you look at like the historical graph of like the difference between that one. If you look back, I usually say like over the last 10 years, but I would say over the last 5 specifically, at the projects that the city has undertaken as a result of I've always been grateful that the past councils and folks that have come before all of us have been so fiscally responsible and helped, prolong the life of certain things within this community. Much to my frustration, a lot of them have become unrepairable in the last 5 years and been forced to have major infrastructure investments, which have really helped, if you will, drive this. And we've gotten a lot closer to the levy limit flexibility than we ever wanted to as a group. We sit in the budget hearings, and Todd was in there last year for the whole thing and heard it then, and then came in on the end, and it was even worse this year. And I'll say bad, but at the end of the day, when you look at some of the things that have been really achieved over the last 5, 6, 7 years, the building we're sitting in, the police department got a new structure, a new facility, the fire department upgrade, we're working on the new salt shed. There's been road improvements. There's been all kinds of things on top of now this year, this huge wage reduction or remedy. I think, the city has done a tremendous job over the last number of years trying to get, our staff to have good, safe places to work and healthy environments and all those kinds of things. But that all comes at as a cost. And you're looking at the cost right now, I think.
And so just as a clarification on that, again, I think there's certainly an impact to this as a result of the amount of work we're doing. I think how that impacts this is a little different. And I just want to clarify that because the loans that we've taken to pay for those things don't impact this. Again, capital is kept separately than operating, but what it's done is it's kind of forced myself, Sarah, Chad, Chief Needfeld, Kale to really spend a ton of time in their own time and resources focusing on those projects to get them off the ground and get them implemented, right? Like Chad and Rick will be the first person to tell you, like building projects are very time consuming, right? And so as a result, and like in some ways, like we've had to bring on additional resources and operating costs to do that, right? And adding those new positions, I don't think they were exactly related to the capital projects like long term, but like, we're a growing community in terms of like the number of people coming through our streets each day. And that's part of what it is just, we got how many different state highways, all coalescing right here. And thus why we felt several years ago to add another police officer. We're growing in terms of fire calls. We added another full-time fire staff in some way, shape, or form, right? We have more people visiting City Hall and doing business permits, things like that. We added up part-time staff. Like, we're trying to keep up with it. This year, unfortunately, it feels like we took a step back because we're so restricted. But if we didn't do that, I'm afraid of who we lose, right? We have some really great department heads. We have some really great supervisory staff. We have some great long-term full-time employees that have such a great knowledge base and skill set here. Like, if we lose those people, it's going to be problematic. And so I think from my perspective, Mayor, if I contradict you, it's only because I maybe see the same thing that you're seeing, but just in a slightly different fashion.
Well, and I think the main point, and when I talk about that, I'm usually probably primarily thinking of this particular building as its impact in relating to that, right? So the annual payments of this building, I don't want to get off in the weeds, but that, I guess that's kind of where my mind was. The payment for this particular building is actually comes out of our levy because of the way the creative financing was structured to get this building done. So rather than the projects that Nate had mentioned where the borrowing is separate of the levy, this particular building, the payments do impact the operational levy to the tune of $112,000 a year. So had this been a traditional borrowing, that 112,000 wouldn't be on this graph, and there would continue to be that $112,000 spread, right? And that just came online. I mean, we're seeing that for the first time in this graph, correct? Or was that 25? Right, 25, I think, was the first year the payment was actually made. Was it made in 24?
We've only made 2 payments.
Right. That's kind of what I was thinking. Well, so it would have been 24 and 25. Yeah. So I guess I use that, and that's not an excuse, but I think that is a big contributing factor. Now, it would have shown up on the property tax bills one way or another, whether it was traditional levy or operational, but the problem is it's put us a heck of a lot. That's been a major contributing factor to getting us as close to that as we are. So if everybody else that sees this is alarmed by it as I am, knowing all the things that I know help me make it a little more palatable. And that's one of the things that I think helps me say, okay, like that's a big, put us a lot closer to that than we would if it was just operational. So I guess that's, if anybody wants more on that, sometime call me because I can go on that train for a long time. But I think it was the right thing to do at the time. So I'm not criticizing anybody's decision, but that's partly what contributed to us to getting there. So thank you for all the work you've put into this budget and guided us through it. Without you and the staff, there's no way. I'll speak for myself. I couldn't achieve what we've achieved over the last 20 some hours of meetings. So
I agree. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, department heads.
Yeah.
Thank you, staff.
And tonight, Nate, you really reminded me of my deep respect for you as our
Oh.
administrator. It came out again tonight. I was like, yep, there he goes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, a lot of help from everybody in putting their numbers together, and the department heads did a tremendous job of really sharpening their pencils, and it wasn't an easy one. And again, I think everybody back there is still a little unhappy with not being able to do more for their community, and that's a very noble reason to be unhappy. But we do the best we can with the scarce resources we have. So,
to that point, I think every department head has made a pledge to continue to provide outstanding service to the community with the limited resources and continue to push forward. And, they're all displeased, but I think every one of them is dedicated to make this work and continue to be at a high level as they always have been. So are you looking for an approval essentially of this?
I do need an
A public-
approval of the draft and authorizing the publication.
This is Emma, and I make a motion to approve this draft and authorize it to be published.
Todd will second.
Cindy, I second.
We've got a motion in 2 seconds. Okay. Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. Thank you. Okay, yes. We've got to do payment of the bills, and then I was going to move public comment up, and then I was going to take a break, if that's all right, if everybody can hold on for just one more minute. Item number 14 is payment of the bills.
Cindy, I make a motion, we pay the bills.
Steve, I'll second.
We've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Emma,
Aye.
Todd Spaeth,
Aye.
Cindy,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Seth,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
and Todd Kirking.
Aye.
All right, if you don't mind, I would like to move the second period for public comment up ahead of the coming closed session. So if there's anybody here that would like to make a comment, public comment, now's the time. Would you like to? No? Anybody online like to make a public comment?
we have a number of folks online. If anybody wants to make public comment, they can unmute at this time and say your name and address and keep it to 3 minutes.
Hearing none, I am going to move on to item number 15, but let's pause, take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll go into closed session. Thanks, everybody. We're gonna move on, which is a possible closed session per Wisconsin statute 1985 1E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. This is in regards to the Hanson Farm project development agreements and MOUs.
This is Todd. I
Hang
make,
on. Don't make a motion. Sorry, I lied. We don't actually need to go into closed session for a little bit, if that's okay. with you, Ted. Okay, so, because most of this is, we've talked about before, it's the development agreements, but when we get into like, hey, are we okay with it? What does it do for the TIF? Things like that, then I'll cue you guys to go into closed session. So we have two things in front of you today. It's for the Dregney portion of the Hanson Farm through Kickapoo Homes, as well as the Vickemeyer Wangen portion. And those are the two agreements that we'll look at today. Just as a reminder, it's a series of duplexes and row houses that we'd be looking at. So the document that will be on the screen shortly here shows the overall sort of general development plan. And the ones in this teal color are the 12 duplexes that Dregney is intending to do. And then the items in orange are the 6 duplexes and series of row houses that Vickemeyer Wangen is intending to do. Okay. This particular, both these have moved past the MOU stage and are at the point of development agreement. So this group has already talked about generally the deal, construction schedule, obligations and things like that. There has been some changes, and I just want to point those out in their development agreements. So I'll use Dregney, and really the difference is what they're building, right? So they're generally on the same timeline where they're doing about a third of their projects every year. And they intend to be done. First one will be completed by 27. Second phase of each ones will be done by 28. The last phase will be done by 29. So I'm going to move Cindy's head here and see if I can get into it. So you can see here, this is Dregney, 4 duplexes by December of 2027. They are going to start next year, but what we're focused on is completion date because they don't hit tax rolls until they're completed.
Is it worth noting they can move faster than that? We're not preventing them from moving faster. This is just saying they'll do at least this.
They want to accelerate. They're selling like hotcakes and they want to get done faster. We're all about it. But at the very least, they need to commit to this. And this here is where rubber really meets the road, is this annual guaranteed tax increment revenue. Come hell or high water, this is the money that we need out of them year over year. So in 2029, right, we need $52,800. I'll just reiterate to folks, when it comes to taxes, the way it works is you build it one year, it hits the assessment rolls the following year, and you get your first year of revenue from it the year after. Right? So they finish building in 27, hits the assessment rolls in 28. They get we tax on it the first time and get our revenue in 29. Okay. So if you're wondering, it's like, why is this here when that's here? That's the reason. There's a little bit of a clawback provision in here at our option. So if people are failing to build on these, there's a couple things that happen. Number one is we do have the right to buy it back from them, but that's our option. And then they can't sell it unless they ask for it to another developer. But again, we talked about this last time. If they want to sell it to an owner occupied, which is the intention of these, they can do that so long as the deed has a restriction on it that it can't be sold to a nonprofit. Okay, because we need to make sure we get that tax base. All right. Let's see, dark sky compliance. And then it just talks about seeding and maintaining. And then here, the biggest change here was right here. Originally, it said that by June 30th of 2026, the city would have substantial completion of the infrastructure. And the infrastructure is, again, the roads, the water, the sewer, the utilities, any of the wet utilities. Doesn't include electric, gas, fiber, things like that. So the wet utilities ones we're responsible for by June 30th. I worked with Sarah and Matt and said, you know, that doesn't make sense because some of the stuff that we're doing in there isn't necessary. The whole point of this language here is to make sure we're done in a timeline that allows the developers to get on there and start doing their thing. Because if we're holding them to a timeline, we have to hold ourselves to a timeline where they can get in there and actually get to roads. So, but that doesn't mean it has to be substantially completed of everything, because we don't necessarily want to maybe put in all the curb and sidewalk while they're still in there doing their construction, because there's an opportunity for stuff to get damaged. So instead of saying substantial completion by June 30th, it just simply says it will be completed sufficiently so as to allow the developers to get in there and start doing their thing. So rough grading, underground utilities, and gravel road base. And then on everything else, we coordinate with them. Okay. And again, the two, both Dragney and Vickmeyer seem to be amicable to that change. The only other thing that came up was the irrevocable letter of credit. And again, the irrevocable letter of credit is there when I say come hell or high water, we must have our money, is that we have a credit in hand that says, like, if for whatever reason they fail to build and create the tax base, they walk away from the project, something like that we have the letter of credit to pay our debt, is the whole point of that. Both developers have been talked to and they're both aware of that requirement. It's, from my understanding and talking to some bankers, that's a challenging thing to get. You have to have a good standing and collateral and all that sort of thing to get it, but they understand that it is their responsibility to make that happen. And so that is the long and the short of this particular agreement. The only other things I'll show you are just, again, you've seen the site plans. Here's what Vickmeyer is intending to do that will be like Exhibit B of his document. And essentially what he's done is he's submitted the same documents he built over on Arena, okay? Which includes a variety of different, let's see, where did it go? Finishes, right? So this is one of the duplexes, that masonry facade, breaks up the plain siding, some nice architectural features on the roof line, and then go down to the next one. And you can see it's a somewhat similar, but they do try to vary the colors. I don't know if anybody's been out to the Arena Drive project, but each particular unit, I think it's nice because they're both cohesive within the development themselves. There's like a theme of design there, but they're different enough that it doesn't, what we're trying to avoid is cookie cutter, right? We don't want to see cookie cutter out there. And essentially, Joe is basically stating, I will follow that same sort of path that I did on an Arena. And that's why he just took pictures of the different buildings, but he's going to essentially replicate that out there on the Hanson farm. Dragney has not submitted their updated floor plans. They did a while back submit like what they typically build when it comes to duplexes. But essentially what I said to them is like, okay, please submit those by our October 28th meeting. And so they can approve those as part of the agreement. So if you're okay with that, I don't have those here for you today, but I will have those for you for the October 28th. I think generally everybody's fairly comfortable with what Kickapoo Homes has done in the community, but I think it's still important that every developer who comes and works with us provide those key items so that we know what we're getting and we can hold developers to it once they start building. So he'll get those as well. Is there any questions on the documents? Again, Joe's is very similar. It's the same deal. We do the infrastructure. You make sure these buildings are in by this time. We sort of talked through this in the MOU. We're now at the development agreement phase, and we just essentially need to get approval of these so that we can, make sure we have the tax base before we look at doing the construction contract at the end. So with that, if there's not any questions regarding the deal or what people are planning on building, I would suggest going into closed session.
Mrs. Todd, I make a motion to go into closed session.
KJ, second.
Got a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Todd Spath.
Aye.
Cindy.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Seth.
Aye.
Andrew.
Aye.
Todd Kirking.
Aye.
And Emma.
Aye.
Just need a moment here to Sarah, for some reason, is still in the meeting. I don't think so. I think she just closed it. She's still, yeah.
We still have to use our microphones because Cindy's online.
online, yep.
Everybody, please remember that.
Cindy
But-
says hi. Okay. Ooh. All right. Just
It's back on screen.
All right, we're gonna open up the doors here. Nate's gonna get everybody back online. You let me know when you're ready, Nate. You're good? All right, moving on to item number 16, reconvene an open session with possible action on items discussed during closed session.
Okay, I can take a shot at it, I guess. If you want a motion right away, okay,
Yep.
make a motion to accept the MOU
Nope,
from, what's that?
development agreement.
Okay, the development agreement for Kickapoo Homes pending site plans and elevations. And for Vickmeyer and Wangen pending the development agreement, right?
And the signing of the construction.
Signing of the
con-
development
contracts for both,
Okay, for both of them, yeah.
right, Laurie? She's nodding.
I have approving, and I'm going to change the names on here, but approved
Yeah,
Rockies
Kickapoo
development
yeah,
agreement
that's what-
contingent on site plan elevation reviews and infrastructure construction contract, and approved Vickmeyer Wangen development agreement contingent on infrastructure construction contract.
I'll second that.
Oh,
There you go. Got a motion and a
that's what I
second.
said, ain't it?
Well, that's what Todd said. We'll do a roll call. Right? No. No.
I don't think we need one.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, item number 16 is adjournment.
That'll make motion adjourn.
Emma seconded it. All those, motion is second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Cindy.
thanks, Cindy.
Welcome.
Did you say?
Night, everyone.
Good night.
Aye.